The ground trembles. It's not an earthquake.
It's the sound of 100,000 Persians advancing.
We must go back to the smell of ash.
1 year since 300 Spartans, led by King Leonidas, were annihilated.
Mardonius saw the division and sent messengers not to Sparta, but to the ruins of Athens.
I'll rebuild your city with Persian gold.
Their families refugees on an island.
If you do not march north now, we will accept Mardonius' offer.
Our ships and our armies will join his, and together we will come to Sparta.
Suddenly, Pausanias was not just facing a foreign invasion, he was facing total civil war.
That night, the decision was made. But Sparta does not move like other cities.
It was done in secret.
While the Athenian ambassadors slept frustrated, the sound of the approaching army grew louder just outside their quarters. The largest army Sparta had ever assembled marched in absolute silence. The next morning, when the Athenians came to protest,
our men are already on the way.
In fact, they're probably miles from here by now.
the game had changed. The deadliest war machine of the ancient world had been activated.
They marched not just to save Athens, they marched to avenge Leonidas.
Mardonius learned of the Spartan march, and against all odds, smiled.
The game of diplomacy was over. Now began the game he knew best: total war.
He chose the wide plain of Plataea, a perfect killing field for his greatest advantage, cavalry. He built a huge wooden stockade, a place from which his archers and riders could operate with impunity. Then he deployed his army, 300,000 souls, Persians, Medes, Bactrians, Indians,
and even Greeks. Greeks from Thebes, who had chosen the invaders' side.
When Pausanias arrived, across the river stretched a sea of tents, an ocean of men. Pausanias saw the trap immediately. If he ordered his hoplites to cross the river, it would be a massacre. He ordered his men to camp on the slopes of the hills, just out of cavalry range.
And so began the most tense standoff of antiquity.
1 day, 2 days, 5 days a week, neither moved.
The heat was stifling. Watched their supplies dwindle.
He sent his elite cavalry, led by a man named Mecistius, a giant on a Nicean stallion with golden bridles.
Gallop to the edge of the Greek lines, shooting arrows, shouting insults, calling the Spartans cowards. Where is your dead king now?
Pausanias clenched his teeth and ordered his men to hold position.
On the 8th day, he ordered Mecistius to attack for real.
Thousands of riders crashed into the Athenian lines. Horses slammed into them.
Riders hurled javelins from above. The Athenians were being slaughtered.
They sent a desperate messenger to Pausanias. We're broken! Pausanias could not move his main force. If he did, the entire plain would open to Mardonius.
Just 300 men! A desperate dash toward death!
And then the miracle happened. A random arrow found its mark.
Sudden, the god of war was in the mud.
His scale armor of gold made him incredibly heavy.
Greeks piled on, hammering his helmet, seeing they could not pierce his cuirass.
Drove a spear through the visor of his helmet, straight into his eye.
They ceased to be an army and became a mob to recover their commander's body. The body was dragged back and forth in bloody mud.
Finally, the heavier, better armed hoplites secured the corpse.
They placed his corpse on a cart and paraded it slowly before all the Greek ranks.
It was the first victory, with immense psychological impact.
Mardonius was furious. Cries and laments for Mecistius's death echoed across the plain.
If he could not beat them with force, he would beat them with hunger and thirst.
Hundreds of wagons loaded with grain were intercepted and burned. Greek soldiers on the hills began to feel the first pangs of hunger.
The only fresh water source, Gargaphia Spring, a small oasis keeping an entire army alive.
Mounted archers galloped to the spring, firing volleys. Every trip for water became a suicide mission.
Pollute the water, he commanded. Destroy the spring.
Destroy the spring!
Morale so high after Mecistius's death plummeted.
Pausanias was in a death trap. Time was running out.
Greek commanders gathered in Pausanias' tent. The smell of defeat was palpable.
We cannot stay. We will withdraw. For a Spartan, the word was poison. It meant failure, cowardice.
The goal was a position called the Island. There they would find water. Orders were whispered. At midnight, the army would move.
On the left flank, the Athenians. A Spartiate captain named Amompharetus planted himself before Pausanias.
Spartan law forbids retreat, he growled. We stay and die.
Amompharetus simply picked up a large rock.
Dropped it at Pausanias' feet. "This is my vote," he said. Time was slipping away. Dawn was near.
Pausanias' patience snapped. "Let him stay," he ordered.
Leaving one of its own captains and his unit alone against 300,000 enemies.
Dawn of the 12th day. The hills were empty.
The Persian general emerged. And then in the distance, he saw chaos.
He saw scattered groups of men in disorder. Desperate flight.
Mardonius laughed. "Cowards!" he roared. "Look at them, the Spartans fleeing!" He saw a Montferratus unit, which had finally decided to move. He mounted his white war horse. "Attack!" he shouted.
The 10,000 immortals surged in a massive human wave across the Asopus River.
Pausanias turned, and his blood froze.
It was pouring across the ground like a black flood, roaring a deafening cry.
Persian riders forded the river without hesitation.
There was no phalanx, only a swarm of men running. Formation! Formation! Pausanias shouted, "Form the line!"
The first wave was not spears. It was arrows. Thousands, tens of thousands.
Persian mounted archers, shooting black clouds of death. And then behind the cavalry came the infantry, the immortals. They no longer shot arrows. They readied short spears. Unfavorable. Unfavorable, the priest shouted again. First Persian elite guard crashed into the Spartan shields. They could only defend. Pausanias turned, raised his arms to the sky. "Gods, do not abandon us now!" It was as if lightning struck Pausanias, a mask of pure fury. He turned to his men. "Sparta! The Spartan phalanx! Finally activated!"
Suddenly, as one organism advanced,
the cry was release. Contained rage, shame over a dead king. The Empire's elite now faced the Spartan phalanx in open field. And for a second, the universe paused. Then they collided. The sound was not swords. It was dull thunder.
The crash of thousands of bronze shields against wicker shields. And the wicker shields disintegrated.
The charge was apocalyptic. For a moment, the Spartan line bent. Mardonius was a storm, shattering helmets, severing limbs. The Asopus River became a deadly barrier. The river ran red with Persian blood for the second time in a year.
They ran to the only place they thought safe, their camp, the huge wooden fortress.
A maddened human mass pushing, crushing each other to get in.
Persian archers shot arrows not at approaching Spartans, but at their own men to clear space.
Finally, they closed the massive wooden gates.
Inside the fortress, survivors panted in terror, but alive they were safe.
And then through the silence they heard footsteps. The Greek army reached the wooden walls.
Persians on the battlements began shooting arrows again. Vengeance had stopped at a wooden wall.
And then from the left flank, Pausanias heard cheers. It was the Athenians.
The Athenians
Were sailors, builders. An Athenian captain smiled.
He turned to his men. Bring the axes! The sound of axes. It is more personal, more methodical.
Persians on the battlements heard the dull thud of wood on wood. It was their tune.
But for every Athenian who fell, another took his axe and kept swinging.
Spartans waited in a silence more terrifying than any war cry. There was no rage on their faces. Surgeons of death waiting for the operating room to open. Then, with a crack that seemed to tear the sky, the gate gave. The great wooden beam split and collapsed inward.
Inside the camp, the Greeks could see a sea of pale, terrified Persian faces.
The first Spartan through was Arimnestus, and hell swallowed the Persian camp.
The 10,000 Spartans poured through like a wolf pack in a sheep pen.
The camp was a maze. There was nowhere to form a line, nowhere to flee.
Their short swords were pistons designed to stab upward.
One Spartan against 3 Persians, all in under 3 seconds. Persians fought with the desperation of cornered rats.
Their round shields were weapons. They smashed faces with them.
Blood coated the camp floor so fast, men slipped in it. The Athenians killed with burning hatred, vengeance for burned temples.
Toppling poles on them, then stabbing through the cloth.
Pausanias was no longer a general. He was a witness.
He saw one group of Persians fled north, led by a commander named Artabazus.
Sensing disaster, Pausanias let them go. The serpent's head was cut off.
The sun began to set. Sunset now lit the end of Xerxes' army. When darkness fell, the screams finally ceased. The silence was heavier than steel.
They buried Mardonius with full military honors due a brave commander.
Vengeance was not a body on a stake. Vengeance was the Red River. When news of Plataea reached Ionia across the Aegean, the Greek cities enslaved by Persia rose in rebellion. Xerxes' empire had not just lost an army, it had lost its aura of invincibility.
It had all begun with 300 men who chose to die in a mountain path.
But it did not end there. It ended here, on a muddy plain.
With 10,000 blood-covered Spartans finally deciding the best vengeance was not barbarism.
It was total victory.